Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm William Chen.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. This month, we are discussing...
Hey guys, can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, I just watched the social satire set in the dystopian Japan of the near future, where, in order to push its draconian agenda and quell the masses, the government enacts a law to offload a wrongly victimized group of individuals to a deserted, trash-strewn island, where they are expected to fight to the death or face eventual extermination. In the face of such odds, the protagonists must band together and rely on the bonds of friendship, especially one battle-scarred lone wolf who learns about, the importance of trust. In the end, the evil government goons are overthrown by an insurgent group of idealistic students who incite revolution and hack the system, literally, while the main antagonist has a surprising change of heart due to his affection for his ward. It's Battle Royale, or Isle of Dogs.
Oh, wow. Wow, thank you, William. That's a wonderful summary.
I think you've pretty much covered all the connections for us, William, so we can all go home early today. So, just listen to that one again, listeners.
Excellent. So it's Isle of Dogs by Wes Anderson and Battle Royale, which has become a bit of a cult classic. And who's the director? I'm not sure who the director is.
It's Kinji Fukasaku. I think this was it was his final film in 2000.
And he was quite an elderly director. Well, maybe not elderly, but an older statesman of Japanese cinema by this time, wasn't he? So I think it's interesting when we come on to discuss the themes in Battle Royale that it does it resonates with me as a school teacher, but certainly as somebody who is mature and is getting frustrated with the lack of politeness and just the rudeness and the insolence of the youth of today. So I feel him in a lot of ways.
I definitely want to comment on that. But what I will say is, these two films, before William had written this wonderful summary, we thought social satire with on an island set in Japan was our kind of angle, and it wasn't until I think all of us watched both films when I watched Battle Royale again that I was like, there's quite a lot more going on here to connect these two films.
And it may be worth noting publicly for our listeners, sometimes we have seen a film in order to then choose the film that's going to go with it, and in this instance none of us had seen Isle of Dogs. I hadn't actually even seen Battle Royale, and I just threw that out there, and we thought, well, they're both set in Japan, and so we'll see what happens. And then it was uncanny to watch both films, which are, on the face of it, so very, very different. It's been actually quite exhilarating to find connections between the two, because I think that's quite unexpected. So hopefully this will be an illuminating discussion.
And before we jump in, we've had a little bit of a discussion, not just between the three of us, but also with our listeners around spoilers in our episodes. And a couple of people who regularly listen to our podcast kind of came to us and said, look, we're only really listening to these once we've seen the films and getting more out of them that way. So you can spoil the films. We've seen them. So we've had a discussion and kind of talked to a few more of our listeners, and all of us have unanimously agreed that we're going to change the ethos of Cinema in Context to be spoiler-filled. So we will have a spoiler warning at the start of each of our episodes. But if you haven't seen Isle of Dogs or Battle Royale, be warned, we will be talking about... everything's up for grabs in terms of spoilers. If you haven't seen them and you don't want to be spoiled, pause the episode and revisit it at a later date.
Yes.
Cool. Excellent. Well, let's jump in that first point that you said, which is the school teacher connection. Because I wasn't a school teacher when I first saw this film.
When you first saw Battle Royale.
Battle Royale. Yeah. And watching the film, I was like, oh gosh, I kind of relate to this teacher sometimes, where he just, I'm not psychotic, but when he throws the knife across the room and to shut up the kid, you do fantasize about extreme measures to get kids to listen to whatever the hell you're saying.
Yes, or maybe not that extreme even, but you're absolutely right. I mean, as with all good sort of fantasy, I suppose, or there's a wish fulfillment element, isn't there, until things go barbarically wrong.
I mean, the colours don't have to explode.
No.
Electric shocks would be okay, I would say.
Yeah. Yes, I did find that was probably pushing it a little too far. But I'd read a comment about Battle Royale from somebody who has been teaching in Japan, a European who's been teaching in Japan for several decades, and who said, look, the older Japanese generation are increasingly frustrated and upset and annoyed by the fact that Japan holds above all else politeness as sort of one of the most key virtues, and that a lot of the older generation feel that the youth of today are the antithesis of that virtue. And I believe that that's partly what triggered the director to come up with a film that's quite so audacious.
Well, it's based on a graphic novel, so it was an existing text that he's adapted, but definitely one that was endeared to him, one that he wanted to explore.
Yeah.
That's an interesting connection to make in terms of their sensibilities of who they are as a nation.
Yes.
I was sitting there thinking, I wonder if he was a teacher at one point, or whoever wrote it was a teacher, because it feeds into that idea that all the kids need is just be rounded up and be taught what's what.
Yeah.
And of course it plays with those sentiments, and particularly with the two main characters who are wonderful young people, and then really the true humans in the class.
I have to say, having only watched it in 2018, and I know the film was made in 2000, obviously one of the first things I thought of was the Hunger Games. And I hadn't read anything about them. I mean, I've obviously read the Hunger Games and I've seen the films. I wasn't aware of her having, written that book based on Battle Royale, and obviously there are some differences, but the very fact that the games in Battle Royale are constructed by the government and are run by the government, and that they are able to track them and see what's going on. It's not quite televised, is it? But we do know that the viewing population knows that it's going on, because the TV cameras are there as the eventual winner comes out and all that sort of thing. And I wondered, did she get more stick for stealing it from Battle Royale, or really do we just go, look, all stories are recycled nowadays?
I remember when Hunger Games came out, a lot of people had drawn the Battle Royale comparisons. I don't know about you guys, but I've always enjoyed Battle Royale more so than the Hunger Games. I think one of the reasons for me is it's really much more character focused, whereas the Hunger Games, I mean, it focuses on Katniss a lot, and she is the audience surrogate in a way. She's thrown to this world, has no idea what's going on, and it's all following her growth throughout all of the movies. Whereas I find Battle Royale is much more of an ensemble piece where there's so many individual tiny little stories of teenage melodrama, and everyone has a purpose, even if they die literally within 5 seconds of you meeting them. And it feels much richer in a better constructed world.
But did you care for them?
Some of them, yeah. I found myself, especially this time, again, being a school teacher, really feeling for some of the kids. Again, they're not really fleshed out, but they're fleshed out just enough for you to understand their motivations as to what they do. Like, there's that kid who, he's a stereotypical high achiever, and he wants to survive the game so he can get into a great school, and that's his only line of dialogue.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah, sure.
And I find with the Hunger Games, you do have characters like that, like Rue and what's her name, Foxface. You just don't have the same richness of detail in all of the participants. So yeah, I do like Battle Royale more as a movie and as a concept, I think, because of that.
I think she's come forward, the writer of Hunger Games, and said that she wasn't aware of that text, and it's just really as a fluke that she came up with a similar idea.
Yeah. And she did push it further, to be fair.
Yeah.
She did set it in an entire context where Panem is this dystopian city, or dystopian land rather, and that there is a desperation to having to go and be tribute and that sort of thing. So it's less, in a way, I think the Hunger Games is, and I almost shiver to say this, but almost more honourable in inverted commas, because it is about, fighting for your district and that sort of thing. Whereas Battle Royale's just kind of really nasty.
Yeah.
It's just, we'll chuck a whole lot of students into a space. We give them no training whatsoever. Because at least in the Hunger Games, you get a little bit of time, don't you, to learn to use your bow and arrow and all that sort of thing. And they're literally told, this is what's happening. They're like, wait, what? Somebody dies in front of them, someone gets their head blown off, knife to the head, and you're out. You know what I mean? And there's something very exciting, I suppose, about being thrown into that situation, but it's pretty nasty.
One of the things that stuck out to me this time that I didn't really pick up as strongly the other times I've watched it, because I think this is the third or fourth time I've seen the film Battle Royale, is the satire around young people feeling like what's going on in their world right then and there is life or death, you know. And as teachers, I think we can appreciate the how emotional young people can get over seemingly silly things to us as adults. And it's like, and that's really emphasized in Battle Royale when the guy's dying and he says to the girl, "You're really cute," or you're so cool, you know, and just that idea that what we're going through is life or death. And that wasn't as I didn't pick that up the first few times I watched it.
First few viewings,
And also, I guess on the same note of watching it in 2018, I do find it fascinating how this concept is now exploding with Fortnite and with PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds Battle Royale games, and the whole Battle Royale genre of video game has in the last 6 months become the biggest thing.
and is it a similar concept?
It is, you know,
So that's
100 players on an island, and you know, some of the games
Fight
are
to the
more cartoony and some are not. But it's one winner and it's deathmatch. And I mean, you know, this is a phenomenon. Kids around the world are not going to class; they're on their phones.
Till 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah,
Sure.
I talk to my students like, did you stay up, watching or playing Fortnite again? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you know what I think is interesting about that is the individualism intrinsic in being the last man or woman or person standing, isn't it? And I wonder, see, one thing that was quite interesting in Battle Royale is that half the cohort ran off to work independently, and the other half, say, banded together to think there is not safety in numbers, but there is power in our banding together. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to know if anyone's analysing the games of Fortnite, to sort of track the players and see who works together with people before they're then forced to be on their own. Do you know what I mean? And I mean this from a sociological perspective, because certainly within the context of the schools that we work in, I think it's fair to say there is less of an individualistic culture among the culture of our kids,
I agree with
and
that.
much more of a don't you talk about my brother's cousin's friend like that, and we're all in this together. So wouldn't it be interesting to see, you know, how people either play those games or how they would respond to these kind of films, you know, and the choices to be made.
And I mean, I think Battle Royale, the film, makes a very, very strong case for working together. The people who succeed in the end are the ones who show empathy and who actually bond together to fight this greater threat. And the lone wolves, I mean, they all suffer at the end. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting because I think there is a tiny segue here into Isle of Dogs, because you'll remember that, and I can't remember, or, you know, it's Duke and King and Boss and the other dude, and oh my gosh, I enjoyed their dialogue together so much. So Ed Norton, Bob Balaban, Jeff Goldblum and Bill Murray. And you notice how those four often, they were together the whole time, even when
Bryan
Cranston's character is off sort of being a lone wolf, or, you know, sort of like I'm not going to do what the rest of you are doing. Let's take a vote on it. Should he do what we tell him? You know, that sort of thing. So I suppose that's an interesting parallel. Probably unintentional.
I loved Isle of Dogs so much. I was so surprised how much I loved that film. I was sort of going, oh yeah, I mean, I've always loved Wes Anderson, but how many more quaint symmetrical shots can I really take? And I took me and my brother went together and we just had a blast from start to finish, and I was laughing, you know, not laugh out loud laughing, but definitely chuckling to myself at visual gags within the first few frames. There's a wonderful energy about that film.
My experience is exactly the same. I'm kind of like fatigued by, I think I probably said before, I'm so bored of Bill Murray, period. And I'm bored of people who use him relentlessly in their films, which is this film.
Do you remember 10 years ago when he appeared in Zombieland? It was the
it was like, wow, we haven't seen him for ages. Yeah, he was cool. And now I'm just over him. And same. So with Wes Anderson films, I'm like, yeah, they're nice, but I don't really care. And I was utterly enchanted by every single frame.
It was
beautiful.
To look
at.
It was beautiful.
Wow. And I said to my husband at the end of it, as the titles went up, I said, you know, I would have a room in my house that was wallpapered, with every frame from that film, because there was so much to look at, and I loved the symmetry, and I really enjoyed the beauty of it all, as well as the charming dialogue and the great character, intonations, and all that sort of thing.
I love that setting with the bottle house.
Oh my gosh, when it all lit up.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. Like they're probably little glass beads, weren't they?
Something
And
like
so
that.
stunning.
Yeah.
And the setting with the abandoned golf course as well. I love that stuff where everything is grey and post-apocalyptic and the tall grass. Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, it probably did so with you guys as well. Didn't it remind you of WALL-E?
I've not
WALL-E?
Wally.
Oh,
the
Do you
Pixar.
know,
yeah.
I've still never seen Wall-E.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
You're missing out.
I am. I know.
I didn't think of Wally, but when you make that connection, I think, I
The
can see
cubes
that.
of trash and just the lapidation everywhere.
Yeah.
I found it really surprising because I love Wes Anderson. And Fantastic Mr. Fox is one of my favourite films of his and in general. Also, Moonrise Kingdom is just awesome, and Grand Hotel Budapest is fantastic. And so I was going in thinking I would be in for Fantastic Mr. Fox-esque, quaint, like storybook adventure. And what we got was much more menacing and
As a story. Yeah.
and also the images, like the
Yeah.
color palette's very washed out and lots of steely greys and blues and yucky greens.
It was almost Tim Burton at times as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
with that sort of antagonist advisor character.
Oh, his face.
Yeah, just really quite imposing. It's
Domo.
quite scary.
Yeah. And then just the whole themes of, the abuse of power and having that fear running through the entire movie. There's a pressure on the characters, and I think it comes through in a lot of small scenes that are really uncomfortable to watch. There's a couple of operations.
That was amazing. The kidney transplant.
Oh my gosh.
But also the chopping up of the sushi.
The sushi.
Oh, I love that. That's right.
the
It was
sushi
amazing,
scene.
but I was just like, that's
the
barbaric.
living,
Yeah.
that was alive. And
Yes.
The fish still wiggling.
Yes.
And the mouth was still going for a
Absolutely
while.
brilliant.
And the animation of that sushi scene is some of the best stop motion animation I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
It was beautiful.
I forgot that was so wonderful. I love the starting with the drumming and just
Oh,
the
yeah.
rotations
Yes.
and just the energy of that just
Yes.
got me
And
so...
that music, again, Alexandre Desplat, for whom I don't always have nice words to say,
So-
following
same here.
Shape of Bloody Water, or Amélie as we like to call it. But yeah, I thought that his music throughout was magnificent.
Yeah.
But you're right about the dark themes and whatnot. There were I can think of at least 3 scenes where I thought, oh, I wouldn't want little people to be watching this. And one of them is when they come across the cage with the bones
Oh
in
my
it.
God,
yes.
And everyone's like,
That's such a
oh
dark
my
joke."
gosh.
Yeah.
And then it's adorable when he's got the key and he opens it and all the dogs go, oh no. It's like, oh no. And the audience is going, oh, that's terrible. It was that easy. But also, I love the running gag of Jeff Goldblum's dog always saying, hey guys, did you hear the rumour? No, what? Did you hear the rumour about so and so? And then he no, actually, I think in this instance it's Bryan Cranston, who's called Chief King. No,
Chief, I think.
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know.
there's so many.
him
dog names.
anyway. Him, the sort of the loner kind of dog, and he talks, doesn't he? He tells the very brief anecdote about the dog who hangs himself by his own collar.
Oh, I know.
And I
yeah.
thought, oh my God, that's awful. And I wouldn't want anybody little hearing that and it moves on, but it still does signify this is not a kid's movie.
It's a gag as well, isn't it? It's such a funny little joke.
Sort of.
Well, yeah.
But also just so horribly human and just awful. So you're right, there's a real darkness to
the
ear being chewed off right at the start.
Yes.
And then the rats taking the...
Yeah. So it's grim, and I really admire, I think I re-admire Wes Anderson for what I think is really quite a bravura film, because not only does it look spectacular, but as you say, William, it really tackles some interesting dark themes in quite an interesting dark way. And
Well, it is a satire of that abuse of power, and it feels appropriate, a film that speaks to the Trumps, the Kim Jong-uns, the Putins of this world.
Yeah.
It feels very appropriate and relevant.
And I love how the central, the central dogmatic belief around unintentional, I swear, around the baddies is so ridiculous that it can be used for satire and it can be used to shine a mirror to our world.
In terms of their obsession with dogs.
With dogs and
with
cats and all the evil people have a
Yeah.
cat on their shoulder and
Yeah.
when they go to jail there's like a little tray for kitty food.
It's very satisfying. I'm a dog lover, to the extent that I actually don't really like cats as people. I don't like them at all.
As people?
I just don't like them, period. You know, I've met a few that I think are okay, but you know what I mean? I'm big on judgment. So as a dog person, it's quite a satisfying film in that regard, that for once, it's not all about cat lovers and cat people, because a bit sick of that. I will just point out that, I know this is a fairly on the nose and rather obvious connection, but I did think it was interesting that the dogs in Isle of Dogs obviously wear collars, and that's part of the control aspect. And admittedly, they don't blow up, but the children obviously have the exploding collars on them, a la Running Man. So there's a connection.
Yeah. I loved in Isle of Dogs. I loved so much of Isle of Dogs. I loved everything about Isle of Dogs, as we know. But the little oracle played by Tilda Swinton, and her gift was just being able to watch television.
Yes,
it was
very clever,
so funny.
Very
and they
clever.
kind of made reference, in her seeing sessions, and it's just her like poking her head over a window while she's watching TV.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're just so wonderfully put together. And that little joke where they talk about it, and she's like, "Oh, what?" Because she's been watching TV.
Yeah,
that's very funny.
You see, so I did think to myself, did Wes Anderson choose? Did he make a conscious choice for his film based on things that he'd seen in Battle Royale? So I thought I'd give it a bit of a Google, and I found absolutely nothing to corroborate that whatsoever, which is somewhat satisfying, given that here we are breaking that particular mould. But it is interesting, and I admit that these are tropes that I suppose if you're going to have people on an abandoned island, then you're going to have dilapidated buildings and probably an old power plant. But both has an old, now unfunctioning, dysfunctional, whatever power plant. Both films have.
Yeah.
And just the very fact of moving, as you said, William, in your précis, a subsection of society, and then dumping them on an island, and also the tracking devices and the ability for both states to be able to track to some extent and follow what's going on. There being zones where there are zones of safety and zones that aren't safe and that sort of thing, But apparently he didn't do that on purpose, or if he did, he hadn't made an interview about it. So there you go. But we'll tweet him this podcast and then get him to comment.
Yes, Wes, if you're listening, just let us know.
Yeah, just let us know.
Yeah, I really enjoyed those shots of the various characters kind of trekking across the island through the middle fingers of the island, and just the different locations that we saw, but also not just visually, but also the way that it constructed that sequence of locations, so that when they brought it back with the trackers following them, you understood where they were going. There's some really clever visual storytelling that happened throughout the whole film, but particularly in that section.
And of course, going back to Wes Anderson just being so detail-oriented, the animation and the puppetry and the sets, it's the case for any stop-motion movie, but especially with this one, it is so intricate. And there's so much layering going on. Because everything is basically in camera. I feel like there's very little that was done digitally, like post-production. And to see backgrounds being out of focus and tiny little smoke effects made out of cotton. That,
every time there was the fights, the bust-ups between the two lots of dogs or whatever, and all the cotton wool or whatever it was. It was just gorgeous.
And so, with everything being in camera, the amount of work that went into this movie is insane.
Yeah. I want to know how they developed the story, because it's clearly had a lot of crafting, and then of course it all has to be planned. I guess it's similar to a Pixar film, isn't it? And they kind of think tank it over a long period of time.
If I remember rightly, there were 4 of them in the credits, and we could look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's him, Roman Coppola, who he often collaborates with, Jason Schwartzman, and I don't remember who the 4th person is, but they've done this many times together, and they will have had a whale of a time putting the story. I love the fact that the story really counts, and that the story is engaging, and it is a great quest movie, and you do want to follow on and see what happens, and that there are those lovely twists that with Harvey Keitel's ruffian dog, half of whose face is sort of shaved or has the fur's worn away, and the other half is still furry, and that there is the assumption that he's one of these cannibal dogs, and then it turns out that he isn't at all. I think there was so much nice. That reminded me
a lot of like George Miller movies, so Mad Max and Babe Pig in the City. I mean, of these horribly scarred, I guess in Babe it was ex-circus animals, and how they have hearts of gold, but rough and gruff exteriors. Yeah, awesome stuff.
There was that whole sequence in that, with the cannibal dogs or the indigenous dogs as they call them. Which there was an interesting narrative as well about indigenous and cannibals and the kind of narratives we tell about people that are, are indigenous. But there was interesting, all the different experimentation of scars that they all had. It was a wonderful visual scape. What about the romance? There's a lot of romance in that film as well.
Well, actually in both, right? Battle Royale, the thing that struck me is every time someone was dying, there was someone of the opposite sex saying, I really like you, or vice versa. And sometimes it was disingenuous because it was to be manipulative, but for most part it was, I've always fancied you and you don't even know my name, and all this. And I was like, oh my... And again, as you said earlier, Jeremy, teen preoccupations. Oh my gosh. I'm sure I spend far too much time in my middle-aged way saying to my students, guys, you're not going to be with him in 5 years' time. Don't even worry about it. You have many more hearts to be broken before you blah, blah. And they're all like, oh, miss, you're bumming us out.
I had a student not go on our field trip this week because she wanted to be with her boyfriend. It's like, come on, zoo trip. Zoo trip trumps boyfriend. But anyway, sorry.
Not in their world.
But
it's life or death.
But in Isle of Dogs, there are only the two relationships. Well, there are actually only the two sort of female characters.
There's three relationships.
Oh, no, sorry. I mean romantic ones. But okay, they're not... Are you talking about Atari and... and Spots?
Yeah, and Spots.
Of course. Atari and Spots is a relationship because
That's not a name, is it? Or are you just...
No, sorry. Atari's the kid. The little pilot.
No, I thought you were referring to the
Greta Gerwig.
Greta Gerwig character, and she's got freckles, and I thought you're
referring to Spots. Her name's... Oh, no, that's Tracy. Oh, you're right. Okay, I hadn't thought about...
They have a relationship.
I hadn't thought about the humans, you're right. So Tracy fancies Atari, who then says at the end that she's an attractive journalist or a reporter on the school newspaper. That's true. I was thinking of the dogs, though. So there's Cinnamon and there's Peppermint, and they're the girl dogs.
And Nutmeg.
Oh, right? Wait. Not cinnamon, nutmeg, and peppermint. You can see where I got that
wrong. The Greta Gerwig character, Tracy, that they modelled her look after Kerry Lynch from Angel at My Table, the Jane Campion.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
He saw that look and wanted to, emulate that.
Really?
Isn't that fascinating?
It's the same hair, except that Kerry Lynch's hair is red, or is auburn, obviously, in Angel at My Table. Good Lord, that's obscure.
Yeah. So Wes Anderson's he's quoted as saying that.
That's odd. Because I noticed that Tracy had those typical sort of cartoon, very, very skinny little legs. That actually, in Battle Royale, all of the girls with their tiny little school skirts, with the indecent amount of petticoat underneath the school skirts, and I know this is a cultural thing, but it's so dubious. But nonetheless, they all have like these perfect little stick legs as well.
How do you feel about an American having to come in and pretty much incite political change in a Japanese context?
Well, how do you feel about an American director making a film about Japan? Hasn't there been uproar about all that?
That was my segue. That's something that we'd shared an article around about.
It's funny, right? Because, the moment where, what's her name, Tracy, smacks around the Yoko Ono character, I did feel kind of off. I know I was going into it thinking, no, this is rubbish. I'm going to go in with an open mind. But with that, it was like, ooh, this is a little tone deaf. But I personally, I find apart from that scene, I was okay with everything else.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair point.
I totally was too, but simply because it's such a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And... I don't even want to stick my toe in issues of whether people of a different race are allowed to tell a story in another country or of a different race. And I know it's really touchy, but I feel like everything about the Wes Anderson's story, and most of his stories, is that they are fables, they are fairy tales, they are... None of them are supposed to be, are trying to be realism. Do you know what I mean? And... I couldn't find it in myself to have a problem with it.
I think there's that criticism that this is, exotifying Japan. How, the main characters that we stick around with, the dogs, have been translated into a very American sensibility of English and all that. And that the intent of having the Japanese characters speak Japanese without any subtitles is to otherify them, which I find really fascinating because it's not something that he's only done in this movie. I mean, in Fantastic Mr. Fox, the human characters are British and the animals are all American. And gosh, that movie goes a long way into, quote, otherifying the humans as grotesque, horrible monsters, and having the animal society be very genteel and very, civilized in relation to that. So I don't, again, personally, I know different people that feel different things, but I don't feel that argument really holds much water. But again, once you bring in the words cultural and the words appropriation together, a lot of people have a lot of views.
I find it really problematic when we talk about exoticism because, and I know that it's now an insidious term to some degree, but the truth of the matter is, I've just spoken about wanting to wallpaper a room in my house with the beautiful, the sort of the beautiful Japanese rice paper designishness of the film and the look of the film, and I think it's gorgeous, and I don't care who constructs it from where. I think it's gorgeous, and I would love to have that as wallpaper in my house, and it is exotic and it is beautiful. And so I don't think that that's a negative thing. But it's really tricky. How can you personify the Japanese characters in Isle of Dogs without their having, and maybe you can, so I'm just run with me on this, but how can, I mean, they all have yellow, shiny sort of skin, and like the Commander Domo, or whatever his name is, who is the evil sidekick, is a grotesque sort of character. You could say, well, look, that's unfair, and so I don't really know how one would have done it differently, given that we're still talking about a fairy tale where you're going to have caricatures of character types rather than ethnic types. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
What do you reckon?
I didn't have an issue with it. In terms of that argument you were mentioning before about, otherifying the Japanese character through their lack of subtitles. I loved that.
I thought that was clever.
I loved that, and how they allowed the language to just be, and how they had other constructs to
get the
help us
understanding enough.
Absolutely,
Absolutely, which I thought was cleverly done. Yeah,
and I think that if you're a Japanese speaking person, then you're going to enjoy that film with an additional layer, because you're going to understand what's being said. I didn't have an issue, but then again, I also feel like I'm not the person to speak on such matters as a white man from New Zealand.
And this is it. I'm not Japanese, and maybe I would have found it way more offensive.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because very few people from Japan have actually commented. It's all Americans, mostly white middle class Americans,
right,
or Asian Americans who are not Japanese. And so I don't know. Do you have a certain right to comment? I don't know. It's messy.
It is messy, and it's and you draw the point about the British, and I know that it's different because British people are white people too, and the British have always been baddies in American movies, until fairly recently. They've literally only ever played baddie roles, and I don't think the Brits have ever really got up in arms or had any justification for getting up in arms about that,
And then I think, because I've been thinking about this after watching Isle of Dogs, you have movies like Moana and movies like The Breadwinner, which very, very, acutely deal with other cultures, but are made by almost completely, Western studios. And no one really strikes up a fuss about those, at least not in the, the popular media and the social media around this stuff. And I wonder whether that's just a Wes Anderson thing, or whether Japanese culture is something that is big enough and that's well understood enough for people to actually feel something when they watch it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But for who to feel what?
To feel discomfort, or to feel that appropriation is actually happening. Whereas the same people who go see Moana have no qualms about it, even though, there's a lot of stuff in that movie that doesn't really sit well.
Right.
Yeah, just because it's more well known.
Yeah.
I also feel like there hasn't actually been that much criticism in regards to what we're talking about beyond an article that I read. I may be wrong in that, but I feel like I haven't, apart from the article that we shared in our group chat, I haven't actually seen much more since then. So in terms of how much of it is part of the zeitgeist is to be debated, really.
I just think it's such a problematic. I think it's such a problematic question when you then, if it was to extend to, well, Asghar Farhadi is Iranian, is he allowed to make movies in France about French people, or is any American allowed to make a movie about something that happens in the Middle East, or whatever it might be? I just think it's I just don't know how you can say, well, Sarah, you have a New Zealand father and an English mother, and that's the limit of this type of stories that you're allowed to tell.
Yeah,
I
totally.
It's like, I lived in Singapore for 2 years when I was a child. I would love to make a story that is situated in Singapore, even if it's from the perspective of an expat New Zealander living there.
Yeah.
But whoa, hold on just a second, because how would I therefore portray the Singaporeans? Well, I would portray them through my lens as an 11-year-old New Zealand girl. But maybe that's racist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Speaking of more extreme points of view, have you guys seen Battle Royale 2?
No, I wanted to, but I haven't.
It's a crazy movie. I would say recommended, but it's not a good movie. It's a crazy movie.
Is it more of the same?
No. So basically, the gist of what happens is the Japanese government, in response to the events of Battle Royale 1, send new groups of students with neck bombs to try and take out the old group of students who've now formed a almost early 2000s Bush era type resistance on a deserted island. And it ends up with the Americans threatening to missile the whole place. And the whole thing is anti-American, like, to the brim.
Right.
And a satire on the invasion of the Middle East.
Right.
And portraying the insurgents as the goodies, and the Americans as like fascist, horrible human beings.
Right.
Very, very interesting, and of course filmed by Japanese directors and with Japanese actors, and commenting on something that is very, very un-Japanese.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. Is it the same actors, the same two leads?
Yes, the leads are the same. But it was directed by Fukasaku's son, because he passed away after starting the movie.
Yeah. So he was in the genesis of the project.
Yeah.
The biggest issue that I have with Battle Royale watching it again is the final 20 minutes. Because the film I thought was really enjoyable. I loved the numbering off of people as they passed away. It reminded me of the Seven Samurai, where you get the Xing of the people, and I loved that when I first watched Seven Samurai, how you were able to keep track of who was around, and it works really well in this film. And one of the most thrilling scenes for me is when the main baddie guy, the one that has his black eyes bleeding, his black bleeding eyes, whatever that is, in the end, how he has that standoff with the girl with the zapper, how there's two kind of villainous forces. It's really great because you care about her at that point. I watched the extended version. I don't know if you guys watched the extended version. You see a clip from her childhood and how a potential guy was going to molest her, and she pushes him down a stairwell.
No, wait, who? The nasty girl?
Yeah.
The horrible one who's really horrible. And like really self-assured, and you're just really looking forward to her dying.
So just before she passes away, you get a flashback to her as a little girl, and her mother's drunk or drugged.
Oh, well, that's interesting, because that's there's some backstory that might have made me think more warmly towards her. Instead of, what a cow.
You change, and then, of course, that she has that battle with that guy and dies.
But wait, does everybody get a backstory in your version that you saw?
No.
Well, I think that's silly. I think unless you're going to give everybody one, I don't think you should just give some people one.
Well, it works. It feels like as the ensemble feel.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and you get information about the characters in other ways. But yeah, I just love that scene and that fight they had, and then the zapper and
the taser
and the taser. That's it. And how the bulletproof vest becomes a key part of it. Things like that.
And so it's all set up throughout the entire movie, and I love it.
Yeah, it's really well, and also like how the rubbish tin lid becomes a key defense mechanism, and how they use the binoculars and things.
Yeah.
But for me, when the other guy who's previously won the competition.
Yes.
When he does that sort of pantomime of, I'm going to kill you guys, and then it's all the cover, and then the military just all leave.
Yeah.
It just all starts to get a little bit silly in a film that is very silly. But
I was going to say, it might have been a bit silly before then, even, Jeremy. But
it
fair
starts to
enough.
break its own rules.
Sure,
I think.
sure. Interesting you say about the countdown, because actually, I feel, and I've said this before, my tolerance for gratuitous violence is slightly... my tolerance for it, I guess, is waning. And so the countdown every time, and they'd go 20 left, and I'd go, really? That many? There was a part of me that... it was a little bit like seeing the Friday the 13th movie. I think it's called, stupidly, the final
chapter.
The final chapter, and it turns out not to be. And how many young people there are in that movie, and I was counting down. What does he get up to? I guess he gets up to 13, or no, actually I can't even remember, but whatever it is, and I'm counting them down, and then I'm 7 people through, and I'm like, can we just hurry this up? Oh my God, really? Only 9? Come on, That's a little bit how I felt with Battle Royale, because there were moments when I did, put the teacher aside and think, hang on a second, this is really unsavoury. I saw a film in the festival last year called Tragedy Girls. And it's a contemporary movie, and 2 young women decide to wreak revenge. No, I know what it is. They're obsessed with a serial killer, and they capture the serial killer, and then they go out and they start serial killing, basically. Right. And I just found it really grotesque. And I know that people really loved it and thought it was clever and cool and da-da-da. And for some reason in that film, maybe it cut a little bit close to my feeling more sort of love and empathy for my students. And I just thought, this is just really horrible and... just nasty. And sometimes I think, I don't need any more nasty. Technically, Battle Royale is only nasty, but there is something quite clever about it.
Yeah, I think without the satire, it's
just nasty.
It's just nasty.
Yeah.
But as a commentary on those things we've talked about, that's what elevates
it. Redeems it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and at least you better laugh about certain aspects.
And I find the teenage melodrama works well enough that you care enough about the characters for any deaths or any successes to actually make an impact. And especially, I don't know, what do you guys think about Takeshi Kitano as the main teacher?
I think he's got a lot of heft, so... I thought he was... in fact, it was almost like he wasn't acting in a way. I don't know. He was really credible.
I love his eye twitch.
Yeah, I just thought...
eye twitch is great.
What were you thinking?
Because it's funny, right? Because he's a great director, and he... I first knew him from watching the reruns of... Did you guys watch MXC?
No.
Most Extreme Challenge. And he hosted a game show in the 80s where Japanese contestants had to go through these crazy gauntlets of obstacle courses, and he would be at the top of a castle, and if you reached him, you would win like 1,000,000 yen. And it's hilarious. And then there was an American dub where they dubbed him and his co-host as like frat boys. Just ridiculous stuff. And then I saw him in Battle Royale. It's like, well, this guy can really act. And then from then, like, I've really enjoyed all his work. He appears on Japanese TV a lot. And
he's been in other movies. I've seen him in other
heaps
movies,
of other movies,
right? Yeah, yeah.
He directed and starred in Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman.
That's right.
Oh,
that's right.
Yeah. I found that his relationship with the young girl very gross. Yeah, and also kind of problematic, because I'm like, why would you put her on this island if you kind of secretly love her? It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And also, that was interesting that she has a dream, right? She has a dream that kind of connects the two of them together. It gets a bit strange.
And a bit unsavoury.
Yeah. And I'm not sure what they were doing.
I've read comments again about Battle Royale that do mention what they term as Japan's sort of obsession with youth, which it's really obvious, isn't it, in the pop culture and the in all of the personification of young people and all that sort of thing. And it's, I don't know, maybe that's borne out in that sort of strange relationship between the schoolmaster and that girl. Yeah.
It's a nice connection, though, again, with Isle of Dogs, that fascination with youth, or the topic of youth, and that the Atari character, he is the salvation of this society, and how he ultimately becomes the leader of
the mayor.
Yeah,
and he's 12, and I thought, gosh, he's articulate and smart and just quite delightful. and terribly self-sufficient and yeah, really.
Yeah. And then, of course, as you say, Jeremy, by the end of it, it's this uprising of young people who manage to save the day. And I thought there'd be some twist where, the government shuts them down or anything, but no, they win.
Yeah.
And they win through belief in their cause and through the mayor's kind of connection with Atari, which I thought was really nice. And of course, leading to the kidney transplant scene, which was, oh man!
So maybe it's the anti-Battle Royale in a way,
Yeah.
That's a great place to finish it. So thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud or through Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook or subscribe to us on Twitter and YouTube. These are great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss or compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then, ka kite anō.